There's a story on the Turkish internet that refuses to die. It's a story about a journalist known only by the initials HB, and it's a story about the Karadedeler, a presence so terrifying that it allegedly wiped out an entire community off the map in the winter of 1989. The Karadedeler Incident is a prominent Turkish urban legend. The story is set in January 1989 in the village of Davutlu, Kırklareli, where local residents allegedly began reportings of sightings of mysterious, tall, dark entities known as Karadedeler, or the Dark Elders, who would emerge after nightfall. According to the legend, panic spread throughout the village as residents claimed these supernatural beings were haunting the area, leading to a sense of hysteria. The story follows a young journalist identified only by the initials HB, who traveled to the village to document the strange phenomenon. After staying for several days and witnessing nothing unusual, HB returned to Istanbul, but left his video camera with a local 14-year-old boy, instructing him to record any suspicious activity. The tale takes a gruesome turn when villagers, including the boy with the camera, had been found brutally dismembered. While the official explanation cited a mental breakdown or a massacre to prevent public panic, the journalist HB reportedly vanished shortly after his release, leaving behind only his abandoned clothes and notebooks in a nearby forest. Despite the convincing, persistent internet rumors, the Karadedeler Incident is widely regarded as a work of fiction and a successful viral marketing campaign for the 2011 movie of the same name. It's a lot like the Blair Witch Project. The film utilized a found footage format and fake news reports to create an immersive mythology. And while the village of Davutlu exists, there's no official records or newspaper archives from 1989 confirming a massacre or a supernatural event of this type, revealing the story to be a modern, fabricated legend rather than a historical reality. This is the story of the Karadedeler Incident. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with another spooky, disturbing story. Before we get to today's story, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like this video and leave a comment for the algorithm. Thanks. The Karadedeler Incident has become something of a modern myth, a digital campfire tale that has terrified a generation of horror fans and conspiracy theorists alike. And the premise is seductive in its simplicity. In January 1989, a journalist went to a remote village to investigate reports of supernatural activity. He filmed his findings. Then he was never seen again. Years later, his footage was found, revealing a massacre that the government and the shadows themselves tried to cover up. The thing about the Karadedeler Incident is it sits right in that uncomfortable valley between obviously fake and terrifyingly plausible. It taps into very real cultural anxieties, the fear of the rural other, the distrust of the state narratives of the late 1980s, and deep-seated theological dread. It's a story that asks us to believe that there are things in the dark that we cannot fight. The story begins in the winter of 1989. Davutlu, a small, unassuming village in the Kırklareli province, in this story is a place on the edge of the world. The late 80s in Turkey were a time of transition, and rural villages often felt disconnected from the modern center of Istanbul. According to the legend, the trouble started when the sun went down. Residents of Davutlu began reporting sightings of non-human beings. These beings were the Karadedeler, a term that roughly translates to dark elders. The villagers describe these entities in ways that defy characterization. Sometimes they appeared as tall, dark men. Other times they were white horses galloping through the narrow streets, or thick plumes of white smoke that moved with purpose against the wind. But the most consistent detail was the eyes, red, glowing, and capable of disappearing or growing in size. This was terrifying. The legend tells us that after dark, the streets of Davutlu were empty, and the villagers barricaded themselves in their homes, terrified of what walked outside. News of this demon attack or haunting began to trickle out of the village. It didn't make it to the front page of the Turkish newspapers, but it traveled through whispers and local gossip until it reached the ears of a young journalist. In the story, he's known only as HB. HB is the classic protagonist, ambitious, skeptical, and doomed. He's often described as a newly graduated reporter, fresh out of college, eager to make a name for himself. He hears the rumors of the paranormal events in Davutlu and decides that this is his story. He packs his camera, your typical bulky late 80s camcorder, and drives to Kırklareli. When he arrives in the village, he receives the classic hostility that you see in horror movies. The villagers are wary. They don't want to talk. They look at his camera with suspicion. But HB persists. He stays in the village for about 10 days. For the first few days, HB finds nothing. He interviews locals who speak in riddles or refuse to answer. He films the empty streets. He records his own frustrations, narrating to the camera that the villagers are superstitious, perhaps suffering from mass hysteria. He is the rational observer, the stand-in for the audience's skepticism. But here's where the narrative takes a tragic turn. HB has to leave the village for supplies, and he leaves his camera behind. He gives it to a young village boy called Mert. He tells the boy to keep filming, record everything, he might have said. If anything happens when I'm gone, I want it on tape. HB leaves, and Mert becomes the eyes of the audience. And this is when the Karadedelers decide to stop hiding. This is where the timeline gets murky. Some versions of the story say the massacre happened days after HB left. Others say it was a full year later. But the outcome is always the same: carnage. The legend claims that a massacre occurred in the houses of Davutlu. 7 houses were destroyed. Entire families were wiped out. The details are gruesome. Bodies dismembered. Strange symbols found on the walls. Weird writings or codes like 7175. The news reports claim that the villagers had killed each other in a fit of collective insanity, but the locals knew better. They whispered that the Karadedeler had finally claimed their due. HB returns to Davutlu. He's looking for his camera, and he's looking for Mert. Instead, he walks into a crime scene. The legend takes a conspiratorial turn here. HB is not treated as a witness. He's treated as a suspect. The local police commander, identified as AS or SHB, under the influence of the entities, or perhaps just the brutal incompetence of the rural military outpost, the captain becomes convinced that HB is the mastermind behind the killings. The story claims that HB was interrogated, tortured, and eventually left to die or in prison, with the official story framing him as the killer. Meanwhile, the captain was driven mad by the entities or his own guilt. The footage from HB's camera that was recorded by Mert is confiscated. It sits in dusty archives for decades, labeled Karadedeler, until it's leaked to the public in 2011. That is the story. It has all the elements of a perfect urban legend: a helpless village, a brave journalist, a government cover-up, and a monster that can't be explained. Is there any truth to the Karadedeler incident? Did a journalist named HB disappear in 1989? Did a massacre happen in Davutlu? The short answer is no. The long answer is it's fascinating to look at how facts can be manipulated to create fiction. The linchpin of the legend is HB, the journalist. If the story were true, HB would be a martyr of the Turkish press. Turkey has a tragic history of journalists being targeted, killed, or imprisoned, and these individuals are well documented by organizations like the Turkish Journalists Association and international watchdogs. If a journalist had gone to a village and been involved in a massacre of 7 households, it would have been a massive national scandal. Even in the pre-internet era, the Turkish press was vibrant. The disappearance of a colleague in such bizarre circumstances would have triggered outcry from all of Turkey. The silence in the archives is deafening. HB is a fiction. He was created to allow the audience to project their own fears onto a blank slate. The village of Davutlu is real. You can find it on Google Maps. But the Davutlu of the legend and the Davutlu of reality are two very different places. In the film and the story, Davutlu is depicted as a cursed or abandoned place, shrouded in mist and mystery. In reality, Davutlu is your standard village. Its population has remained relatively stable over the years, hovering around 100 people. The stability contradicts the narrative of a massacre that wiped out many people and destroyed 7 houses in 1989. A loss of that magnitude in a village of roughly 100 people would have effectively ended the settlement. But the most damning evidence comes from the elected village head of Davutlu. In 2011, when the film was released and the rumors started flying, the village head stepped forward. He had been the head of the village in 2011, and he had also been the head of the village in 1989. And what he said was blunt. There was no such incident in our village in 1989, nor before, nor after. He was furious. The film and the viral marketing campaign had created real harm to his village. People were looking at Davutlu with suspicion. Neighboring villages were gossiping. The internet was calling his home a demon village. He announced plans to sue the filmmakers for the distress caused to the community. And here is a collision point between entertainment and real-world consequences. The filmmakers used a real location to ground their horror story, but in doing so, they stigmatized an entire village. So where does the evidence come from? There's censored newspaper clippings and grainy video. It was all part of a brilliant viral marketing campaign. The producers of the movie Karadedeler utilized the found footage playbook to perfection. They released images of old newspaper clippings with key information blacked out. By letting the audience solve the mystery, the marketers made the users feel like investigative journalists. They were discovering the story as they went along. This creates a powerful psychological buy-in. Once you have discovered a fact, you are more likely to defend it as truth, even when presented with the fact that it's not true. The Karadedeler Incident is a movie. It was produced by Prof Films, and it included Turkish actors. The presence of professional actors is the final nail in the coffin of the true story theory. These were recognizable actors in Turkey. If this were real found footage from 1989, why are there famous actors playing parts in the movie? The filmmakers' defense was that they were presenting reenactments based on true events, and they blur the lines by having the actors play themselves or reconstructed versions of the victims. The early 2010s were the golden age of found footage horror globally. Paranormal activity had revitalized the genre started by the Blair Witch Project in 1999. Audiences loved authentic scares. In Turkish, this trend merged with a specific cultural explosion. For decades, Turkish horror had tried to copy Western tropes. Dracula, zombies, exorcists, but they never quite landed. A vampire in Istanbul feels like a tourist. The Karadedeler Incident was a response to this demand. It took the rural isolation of the Blair Witch Project and overlaid it with Turkish mythology. It was a low-budget production, but it punched above its weight because of this marketing. Why does this legend persist? Why do people still post on forums asking if the Karadedeler are real? This is because of specific cultural fears within Turkey. The Karadedeler are not ghosts. In Western horror, a ghost is usually a human soul with unfinished business. You can reason with the ghost, you can solve its murder and set it free. Here, these beings are different. They are a separate race of beings created from smokeless fire. They lived on Earth before humans. They have free will. They have their own societies, religions, and wars, and they are tangible. They are not immaterial spirits. They can physically interact with the world. They're shape-shifting. They can appear as black dogs or ghosts or tall men. They can possess or take control of humans. And they're associated with desolate places, ruins, and rural isolation. This taps into the primal fear that the land itself is hostile, that the modern village is just a thin veneer over the ancient, darker ownership. And the legend is set in 1989 for a reason. The late 80s and early 90s in Turkey were defined by the conflict in the southeast, political instability, and the shadow of the 1980 coup. There is a concept in Turkish politics known as the deep state, a coalition of military intelligence and bureaucratic elements that allegedly operates outside the law to protect the state's interest. In the 1990s, scandals revealed that the state was indeed involved in some extrajudicial activities. People did disappear. Villages were evacuated. The Karadedeler Incident weaponizes this history. The lore claims that this government group covered up the massacre. In the context of Turkish history, a government cover-up of a village massacre is a political trope. The journalist HB being framed fits the narrative of the press being silenced by the state. By blending the supernatural terror of the Karadedeler with the political terror of the deep state, the story becomes hyper-real. It feels true because it mirrors the traumas of the era. The ghost story becomes a way to talk about the unspeakable political violence of the past. The villagers in this story warn HB to leave. Their silence is as telling as their words. They represent the rural wisdom that the urban journalist ignores. Mert, the boy, is an innocent eye. By giving the camera to a child, the film strips away the professional distance of the journalist. The horror becomes raw and unfiltered, and the audience plays an important role in the legend. The skeptics say it's obviously fake. The believers say they have a cousin who lives in the area and they don't go there at night. And then there's the uncertain who say, I know it's a movie, but the atmosphere feels so real. That third group, the uncertain, is where the legend thrives. People want to be scared. They want to believe that there is still mystery in the world. When a user on Reddit asks, is it available somewhere? Can you provide an English translation? They're trying to participate in the mystery. They're buying a ticket to the ride. The Karadedeler Incident is a masterclass in modern folklore. It is a lie that tells the truth about its culture. It shows us the power of viral marketing, demonstrating how a few uncensored JPEGs can rewrite the history of a real village. It highlights the evolution of Turkish horror, moving from cheap Dracula knockoffs to deep, culturally resonant stories. And it exposes the scars of 1989, using a ghost story to process the very real anxieties of a nation in transition. Did HB die in Davutlu? No. Did the Karadedeler massacre a village? No. But the story exists, and exists in millions of views on YouTube, in the heated debates on Reddit, and in the nervous glances people cast toward the shadows when driving through the countryside at night. And in the end, isn't that what a good ghost story is supposed to do? It doesn't need to be true to be real. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. and leave a comment for the algorithm. Follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok. My username is The Spooky Lawyer. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, leave a comment and tell me about it. Or send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a link in the description of this video to buy me a coffee, so you can buy me a coffee, or you can become a member of this channel. For the $1.99 tier, you can get access to exclusive content, including exclusive videos. You also get access to videos before they go public. I appreciate you considering this. You can also support me by continuing to like, share, and watch my videos. And I do really appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.